Hi, welcome to our series on rule set recipes and what you can do with rule sets to automate your pay run. My name's Garth Bellick, and today we're going to be looking at something that's fairly topical for December, the time that we're filming this video, which is looking at specifically at public holiday. How we can automate public holidays so that the pay run automatically assigns public holiday rates or public holiday conditions to a particular employee. Specifically, what we're going to be looking at today is the typical scenarios of an employee having a day off, an employee being paid a penalty rate for working on a public holiday, and we're going to look at one of the more common scenarios, which is also the employee getting the flat rate and still getting a day of annual leave for working on a public holiday. So we're going to take you through all those, plus have a look at the public holiday calendar that is a feature of our advanced subscription. We're first of all going to have a look at our pay categories and set those up to how we want them to work. So I'm going to go to business settings and down to pay categories. And under permanent ordinary hours, I'm going to include a linked category called permanent public holiday in brackets day off. This will be a flat rate that we pay to the employee. So we're not going to include a penalty. We're going to pay them 9.5% super, and we are going to let it accrue leave. Save that. We're going to build another one. This time it's going to just be called permanent public holiday. Simple as that. And in this case, we're going to pick on probably the most common scenario across modern awards is that the employee gets double time and a half. So we're going to, in this case, still pay super, pay 150% on top of the normal rate, and we're going to let that accrue leave. So that's done. The next thing we're going to have a look at is work types. We're going to create a work type that lets the employee tell us whether they were actually at home on this public holiday. So I'm going to create this one called public holiday not worked. It's only going to be applicable to full-timers and part-timers, and we're going to link it to the pay category we just created, which is public holiday day off. Okay, that's the only work type we really need in this scenario. The other thing we're going to look at is creating a tag. Another thing that we're going to check is to see whether the location setup all have a state that's been allocated to it. So as you can see, by default all of my locations had New South Wales. Now if I added a different location, let's say I called it our Queensland branch, I should always make sure that a state has been assigned to that particular location. The reason for that, and you can see Queensland is now listed, the reason for that is that locations are looked at by the public holiday calendar, and the state that the location is in is used to determine whether a public holiday exists on that particular day. And we're going to use a tag to turn on the condition as to whether the employee gets a penalty rate or gets paid a base rate plus an applicable amount of leave. So it might be annual leave or something like that for each hour they work. So I'm just going to create a tag here called annual leave instead of penalty on public holiday. Doesn't really matter what you call it, just something that's meaningful to you. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the public holiday calendar and just go through that. By default, you don't have any public holidays imported. The first time that you use a public holiday calendar, you'll see this yellow bar at the top telling you that you can import public holidays. Just note that you can only import 1 year at a time, So when it comes around time to December or something like that, you need a calendar entry that reminds you to add public holidays to the next year. So I'm going to choose the cog, and I'm also going to add public holidays for 2016 as well, and import those. So you'll see what it does. It populates public holidays by state. If I click on, for example, Boxing Day, only certain states have Boxing Day allocated on the 26th of December. If you live in an area that has a local public holiday, so it might be a show holiday or something like that, you can also choose a day and put in your own public holidays manually. So say I call this show holiday. You can decide what states it applies to, or you can even go to very specific locations. So let's say it only, in this case, applies to Rule Set Recipes Department 1. It might be based in a regional area. So if they work at that location, it'll have a look and show that that's a public holiday. If you feel that any of these public holidays are not applicable to you or anything like that, you can always make the changes to the system here. So for example, we might have a look and say that New Year's Eve isn't applicable to us or something like that. So now that that's set up, the system knows what dates are actually a public holiday, and that's one of the pay conditions we can use in our rule set. So let's have a look at our rule set now. We are using a rule set that we've used in previous demonstrations that already have some rules. For all intents and purposes, we are going to be doing a lot of these rules at the bottom of this rule set, only because we're dealing with something where we're paying double time and a half. So the rule sets work in order of evaluation from top to bottom, meaning that what we do at the bottom happens last. Of course, in most cases, you want something that pays the employee more to happen at the bottom. So in our case, most public holidays are going to be at the bottom of the rule set. So we're going to add a rule, and we're going to call this rule penalty rate on a public holiday. Okay, so you say when time worked in a shift period where the day is a public holiday. Now we can say any public holiday, or we can specify a specific public holiday. So if you had a special, I've seen triple time for Christmas Day and things like that. So we can cater to those scenarios. This part's quite important. Match the part of the shift that lies on the public holiday. So in this case, what we're saying is any time between midnight and midnight on a public holiday is included. You can, at your option, change that to be if the shift starts on a public holiday or if the shift ends on a public holiday. Say we had a shift worker scenario where it said that if the shift ends on a public holiday, that entire shift is to be included as a public holiday. We can actually cater to those scenarios. So we add another condition in here, and this time we want to say, well, we've got this work type called that I had a public holiday on a day off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say work type is not one of public holiday not worked. So far we're having a look to see whether it is a public holiday and that the shift has ended on a public holiday, and we haven't chosen public holiday not worked as our work type. In this case, we're now going to say that that's greater than 0 hours, meaning this result is an amount greater than 0. We're going to apply permanent public holiday, which is our penalty rate. And I'm going to put that to the bottom of the rule set because it is paying double time and a half. So I want it to override anything before it. Next scenario I'm going to have a look at is where instead of getting double time and a half, we only get flat rate and we get a day of annual leave instead. So we're going to set up the conditions very much the same. So annual leave instead of penalty on a public holiday. So very much the same to start with. When time worked in a shift period where day is a public holiday, it ends on the public holiday, we're going to say where work type is one of public holiday not worked. We're going to say it's not one of public holiday not worked. In other words, we're saying if this is chosen, we're going to ignore this rule. And this time we're going to say employee tag has annual leave instead of penalty on a public holiday. And that's greater than 0. So the employee has to have this tag, they have to have not chosen public holiday not worked, and the day that we're looking at has to be a public holiday. Then what we're going to say is we're going to do a few things, what we call multiple actions. We're going to choose a pay category permanent public holiday. We're going to set a rate multiplier to 0.4, 40%. So what we're saying here is we usually pay double time and a half. In this case, we only want to pay the flat rate, so 100% instead of 250%. So if you take 1 divided by 2.5 or 100 divided by 250, your result is 0.4. So it's going to take whatever rate we normally pay and pay 0.4 of that rate. That's how the rate multiplier works. We also want to add a leave accrual. And it's going to be 1 unit of annual leave per hour worked. I'm going to reorder that one so that it falls under here. I'm going to make an edit to the first one that we did to include a condition that says we're only going to evaluate this particular rule if the employee doesn't have the tag annual leave instead of penalty on a public holiday. So we're going to activate those rules and we're going to test them. Let's work on the weekend in the 26th. So we know Friday the 25th is a public holiday, so let's put in 9 AM to 5 PM. And let's use no work type. We're just going to use it. It's just going to be an ordinary day of work. And we're going to use Chuck because he has the tag. So in this case, we've got permanent public holiday for 8 hours at $180, and we have 8 hours of annual leave applied as well. So it's paying him the flat rate, and it's also paying him 8 hours of annual leave. If I change the employee, but I get rid of the work type, and this employee doesn't have the tag that we created, it's just going to pay them public holiday at double time and a half. So there's a few scenarios that we've just gone through. Very useful when you're working through public holiday periods. There are obviously other conditions we can use public holiday in, but I just wanted to run through these today because there are a few of the more common scenarios we've come across. Always keep your import and keep your public holiday calendar up to date, and you'll find that pay runs take care of themselves around the holiday season. Thanks very much.